Apocalypse Now is a movie about the Vietnam War released in 1979. Thanks to its portrayal of authority, purpose, and combat, it falls under the genre of a Vietnam War film. The first scene opens up as a pan over a beautiful forest with no explanation as to where we are or why we're there. There's the occasional helicopter that goes across the screen and the sounds lingering in the background. All of a sudden, the forest bursts into flames with the song The End by The Doors playing in the background, which goes, "This is the end, beautiful friend. This is the end, my only friend, the end." This opening image leaves the viewer confused as to why this beautiful place that we were shown had to be destroyed. The first time we meet Captain Willard, the main character, who by his title we know he holds a position of authority in the war, he is a mess. He's drinking too much, he's smoking too much, he seems a little bit paranoid and maybe even crazy. At one point he punches a mirror and has to deal with his bloody hand, and in this image here, he is screaming to himself alone in his room. Later, people come in to get him to bring him to his next mission, and he has to be forced out of bed and held up to take a shower. This immediate impression of an authority figure is one that is very negative in this movie, and we can see that he is really not all put together. The next authority we meet is the general, who's giving Captain Willard his next mission. Every shot of the general is either straight on or looking down at him from an angle, making the audience seem like we are higher up than he is. He also never addresses Willard from a higher up standpoint. They're either always sitting or standing at the same level, or he is below Willard, which makes him not seem as much of an authority figure as he should. The man that Willard is assigned to kill, Kurtz, is presented as someone who's crazy through the audio recording in the original scene. However, through the rest of the movie, looking through his files, he's also presented to us as someone who has achieved a lot in his position in the army. He was next in line for a very high-ranking authority position, and all of his achievements in the army are very impressive. Presenting Kurt to the audience like this twists his light and the light on authority, specifically higher up U.S. authority, into something that maybe shouldn't be trusted and whose judgment might be skewed. The next figure of authority we see is Colonel Kilgore, who is presented to the audience as a very strong character. Most shots of the colonel are straight on or showing him above his men, almost unfazed by all of the combat around him. Presenting a figure of lower authority like this shows more trust in the people closer to your rank rather than the people higher up. Just before the first scene of combat that we see in this movie, there's a pan over the village that they're about to bomb, and it's very peaceful. There are women and children going about their daily lives, coming home from school, organizing, doing errands, whatever. This sort of shot makes the audience question the purpose of the coming combat because of how peaceful and how nonviolent the people seem before Americans come in and are very violent towards them. The coming scene of combat is sort of confusing and very shaky. A lot of the shots are really fast and it's sort of hard to tell what's going on. It's obvious to the viewer that there is very little resistance coming from the Vietnamese, showing only one or two people shooting at the helicopters. The men inside the helicopters, for them, the combat is very individualized, focusing in on each person's face, specifically the colonels. The purpose of the combat in the first place is not at all clear. We don't know why they're there, we don't know why they're bombing this village in the first place, and we don't know why the Vietnamese are resisting. We only know that the men in the helicopters are trying to get through it and get through it together, without anybody dying. There are many other instances in this film where the purpose is not at all clear, like this one where they invade a small boat carrying supplies and kill the people where nothing is really even going on that boat, and they kill them for no reason. When we finally get to meet Kurtz, he's shrouded in darkness and in mystery the first time we see him. Many of the beginning shots of him are in the shadows or with a gruesome face paint on that make him sort of look like a monster. Later, however, he is in some lighter shots, him gathered with Vietnamese children, him alone in what could be a temple or just a room, speaking to himself about philosophy and about his own thinking. Our first impression of him is that he is sort of crazy, but then it sort of changes into maybe not. And this presentation of him changes the way that we see authority because they want him killed. His eventual murder at the very end of the movie is very dark and paralleled with this animal sacrifice, which almost makes him seem like a martyr who needed to be killed for anything to change. The events preceding the release of this movie shine a light as to why they decided to make this movie at this time. The Pentagon Papers were published to the New York Times in 1971. These papers revealed that the Johnson administration had been lying not only to the public but also to Congress about the U.S. involvement, progress, and success in Vietnam so far. The release of these papers didn't initially draw a lot of public attention. It wasn't until the U.S. tried to stop the New York Times from publishing a fourth installment that people got interested. Daniel Ellsberg, who had discovered and released the paper, was criminally prosecuted and was charged with espionage and government misconduct. This incident caused a lot of people to distrust higher authority because the government had been lying to the public about the involvement in Vietnam. Not even 1 year after the publishing of these papers, there was a break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate office complex in Washington, D.C., and the Watergate scandal started. This break-in revealed evidence that Nixon had been bugging the offices of political opponents and people who he or his officials thought were suspicious. His administration had abused the power of the FBI and the CIA to harass groups and political figures who he thought might be a threat. Not only that, but after this information was revealed, the Nixon administration attempted to cover it up and destroy any incriminating evidence against the president. It was because of this scandal that Nixon resigned from office in 1974. Thanks to this giant scandal, big government wasn't really trusted by a lot of people because specifically the president himself had created this whole scandal and lied to the people. Apocalypse Now can definitely be categorized as a Vietnam War era film, both because of the cinematography techniques and because of the widespread distrust of big government that was set in motion by these events in the 1970s.